Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RosieCon Book Festival 2021. I am so excited that you could join us this evening. My name is Diane Rogers, and I am the school librarian at Ben Davis Ninth Grade Center in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am also the founding member of the RosieCon Book Festival. I am so excited that you could join us tonight for How to Frame a Story. Tonight's author panel is the sixth in a series of virtual events, all based on the books and the authors from the Elliott Rosewater, Indiana High School Book List. This is a recommended reading list of contemporary titles for teens in the state of Indiana. The Rosewater list is renewed every year with new and exciting books and is sponsored by the Indiana Library Federation. Near the end of each school year, teens from across the state vote for their favorite book from the list, and the winning title is given the Rosewater Award. Voting is online and is currently open, so log on to the Indiana Library Federation website, find the book awards, and vote for your favorite novel. Voting is open through the end of April every school year. Before I officially begin events this evening, I do want to formally thank our sponsors of the festival. Money and support has been provided by the Lilly Endowment for the Arts, the Indianapolis Foundation Library Fund, and Wayne Township Schools to support RosieCon Book Festival. Thank you, sponsors, for your support. Now, our panel tonight, it's called How to Frame a Story. We will be talking with authors who have lots of writing experience under their belts. They really know the process of writing, and they all do it so well. Many of tonight's authors also write novels for a variety of age groups, from young children through adults. Tonight's moderator is an author himself, G. Neary. Just recently, within the past few weeks, Greg's book, Ghetto Cowboy, was released as a Netflix movie called Concrete Cowboy. So I hope you can watch it. It's awesome. Greg, thank you for being with us tonight. Take it away, Greg.
Right. Thank you. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to the session, How to Frame a Story. I just want to say I'll be asking questions throughout this hour, but if you have questions yourself and you're on the Zoom session, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can type in questions and I'll be checking those out. And if you're watching from YouTube, you can type questions directly into the comments and we'll be monitoring those as well and getting to those towards the end of the session. So tonight's session, How to Frame a Story. One of the things I love about writing is that there's no right or wrong way to tell a story. There's only your way. And the journey to discovering what your way is the basis for what we are talking about tonight. Your craft and how aware of it you are while you write. So I kind of look at this spectrum. On one hand, you have like an intuitive writer who kind of goes with the flow. They don't outline. They let the characters lead them throughout, the story, and they're not too aware of the plot, and they just dive in and kind of let it happen. On the other end of the spectrum is kind of the organized writers who figure everything out in advance, treatments, scene beats, plots, full character bios and backstories before they even start writing. And then there's everyone in between. So to me, there's no right or wrong approach to writing. There's only your way, and that way that makes your brain create great stories. So with me tonight are 5 terrific authors who I'll let them do a brief intro themselves, and I'll just call them out. So let's start with Melanie. Just introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming this evening. Thanks to Diane and to Greg. I appreciate you both. So yeah, my name is Melanie. I am a fiction writer, and I've published 5 novels for middle grade readers, and then 3, my adult novels tend to be historical fiction. So the first was Audacity, which is a novel in verse about labor issues and strikes in the early 1900s. The second, which was on the Elliott Rosewater list, was An Uninterrupted View of the Sky, again, historical fiction, set in the 90s. And actually just came out in February. This is Maisie. It's a book about musical theater in the 1950s, farm girl with big Broadway dreams. So That's me. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Alan, why don't you go?
Thanks so much. Hey, Greg. Hi, Diane and RosieCon and audience. Alan Zadoff, an author of 9 books. You may know me, mostly young adult, and my first middle grade series is out this month and in May, the first 2 editions, Wild and Chance. It's like Jason Bourne meets Homeward Bound. It's all narrated from a female dog who's lost her memory and is trying to find out who she is. You may also know me from the Boy Nobody or the Unknown Assassin series. I think that's what got me here. And to RosieCon, I Am the Weapon. Anyway, I write genre fiction, thrillers, action, a lot of other humor, a lot of other kinds of stuff. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Alan. Wendelin, why don't you go on next?
Hi, I'm Wendelin Bandrona, and I'm the author of about 35 books for young people, and they're mostly middle grade and young adult. I have the 18-book Sammy Keyes mystery series, so I'm happy to talk about plotting. And the book that got me here is Wild Bird, which is a standalone young adult novel about a girl who gets taken against her will to wilderness therapy camp to try to find herself back. And the book that I think is actually of use to aspiring writers from middle school up through adult is the book that came out at the beginning of the pandemic, which is called Hope in the Mail, about writing and the writing life and publishing. And I put everything I've learned in 20 years of the School of Hard Knocks of this industry into this, because I wish I'd had a book like this when I was first starting out. So happy to be here, happy to have this discussion with these other great authors.
All right, thank you. Jeff, why don't you go next?
Okay, hello. I'm Jeff Herbaugh, and I am an author of 9 novels, maybe no, 1 kid's book, picture book, and 8 novels. I tend to write for kids who don't want to read, so I'm very poor. But you'll see kind of there's sports themes. I think Cracking the Bell is on the Elliot Rosewater list. Stupid Fast was as well. So yeah, I am inspired to try to get kids who like to read stuff, and it's usually by making a lot of dumb jokes and putting things in that I know my kids were very attracted to when they were 14 years old. So I'm so happy to be here.
All right, thank you. And then finally we have Jennifer.
There I am. Hi. Hello, everyone. I am actually humbled to be here with people who have written so many books, so many amazing books. It's really nice to meet everybody. I will say I have written 11 novels. 2 of them are published. And the one that I'm here for is Dreamland Burning, which is part murder mystery, part very much historical fiction. It's told by dual narrators, chapter by chapter, and it is centered around the events of the Tulsa Race Massacre, which is just coming up on its 100th anniversary. Isn't quite the right word, but it did take place May 31st to June 1st of 1921.
All right, thank you. So let's dive in. The first question really is about that spectrum I mentioned in the intro. How aware are you of your exact process, and where do you think you fall in that spectrum? And have you ever wandered away from that process and it caused you to massively fail in some way, or you couldn't actually do it? So I'm just going to call on people for this question. Why don't we start with Alan?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm very aware of my process. I think that for me coming up, I really appreciated what Jennifer said. I wrote a lot of stuff before anyone wanted to pay me to write anything or frankly read anything I'd written. anyone who wasn't a friend. So I took a lot of writing workshops. I studied writing and story structure. I teach it to some extent and coach it. So it's something that I have a lot of awareness of, and yet I would say that at foundation, the process is still a little mysterious. You know, everyone's favorite question is like, where do your ideas come from? And I can kind of answer that, but I can't really answer that question. I'm feel like when I work, I'm tapping into a place that I don't quite control. It's not quite conscious, and that I'm channeling in a way. And so what I think in my work, I'm kind of in between. I'm trying to match. I have a structure and an outline and an idea of where a story is going. And then I have the mystery of how the story is unfolding. And there's a kind of a beautiful tension between those things. You know, if I don't have some idea of where it's going, then I'm totally lost and I could write forever and not get there. But on the other hand, if I don't allow for some of that mystery and passion and let the characters speak, then the work's not alive. So that's kind of my experience. Let's hear other people's.
Okay, how about Melanie?
Yeah, so I tend to be really kind of atmospheric about this, and I'll get my ideas through an image, or I'll wake up from a dream, or it's this very like I have a mood. And so, yeah, I'll start writing before I have a lot of things answered. And then I'll sort of find my way and end up with a very short, complete, very short draft, like 20,000 words or something. And then I sit back and say, okay, what do I have? And what themes have emerged, and what image systems are at work here, and is there a plot? And then from there, I try to be more deliberate and intentional about how the story is shaping, and then try to insert myself a little more into the structure. But to start, I just let that mood and that vision that I have, I just let that run.
Yeah. So, Wendelin, since you wrote a book about it, you must be very aware of who you are as a writer.
Well, what's so interesting to me is that there's me, the writer, that when I was first starting. And so I went through a process of being rejected for 10 years before I got my first book placed. And that writer is a different writer than the writer I am today. And a lot of that had to do with going to the school of hard knocks of learning to write. But I came to writing as a form of therapy because bad stuff happened to my family. And this was the way that I got back at the bad guys. I could tear them up on paper, you know, I could kill them off on paper. So it was something that I came to because I needed a way to deal with the things that were happening in my personal life. And that's when the bug bit me. And then I really didn't know what to do with that bug, because I was, we brought up in a family of scientists. And so we were going to go do something scientific with our lives. And, you know, writing was not a way you could make a living. So there's that person who started writing. And then there's the person I am now, which has finally figured out the process that works for me. But a lot of it is ethereal. A lot of it is that I need to feel it. I need to feel the mood of the story, the idea of the story. I need to get to know the characters, feel the characters, and go through that process of really bringing them into my heart. But then I also have to be disciplined about the plotting, especially if you're doing a mystery, because if you just go nilly-willy and you don't have your structure mapped out, then it's not going to be very satisfying. Mostly the main thing is I need to know where I'm going. For me, I need to know where I think the end is before I begin.
Cool. Jeff, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I'm very aware of my process, and then it never works. So I really thought, you know, my second book was stupid fast, and I did sort of a burst of a first draft of 6 weeks, like got everything out on the page, and then did sort of what Melanie does, which is figure it out and build around it. And I thought, oh wow, after all this time, I finally figured out how to write a book. and then it never happened again the same way. And so every time I write a book, I think, there it is. And then it doesn't work. So the one thing that seems to be consistent now is I do a lot of backstory on characters, and I do a lot of interviewing of characters really early on. And that seems to save me trouble in the middle, because I'll know them well enough, and I'll know some of the stuff about the objective world, like stuff that they have in their bedroom, or their favorite pair of pants or whatever that can be helpful. But yeah, I'm not very good about doing the thing that I think works. It just doesn't work.
Right. Well, that's a process in and of itself, I think. Jennifer.
I'd say that I am, if Stephen King says you're either a seat of the pantser or a plotter, and I started off as a seat of the pantser, and that didn't work out very well, because if you break down those elements of fiction, to me, plotting is by far the most difficult. So characters, I let come naturally, pacing, voice, hopefully that comes naturally. But plotting is tough, and I've been grateful to find that historical fiction actually gives me a scaffolding to build that plot on. So Dreamland was very historical. Everything I've worked on since has been, I like to give myself lots of time, like we're talking 6 months to a year, to do research and really immerse myself in the time period. And then as I start working on the story, it's really a matter of peeling back all those wonky little details that I love learning about, but that readers aren't necessarily going to want to know in the middle of a story. So then it's a process of writing and then deleting. I keep a clipboard. And so probably where I write, delete what doesn't work, put it in the clipboard. And I'd say by the time I finish, my clipboard is usually twice as long as the manuscript. So it's a slow process. I outline at the end to make sure it makes sense, but it's gotten more painstaking over the years.
Yeah. I mean, I think failure is a great way to learn actually what your process is, because in the beginning, you might not be really aware, and you find things that work, but maybe you don't identify them. But then when you wander and try something completely different and it totally doesn't work, you're like, oh, maybe I should go back to whatever that was. So
Greg, what's your process? Do you mind?
My process is
sharing with us?
very
Yeah,
intuitive. It's very intuitive. Like, I feel the characters lead me through the story. Like I stories just fall into my lap, it feels like, and then it's like, oh, what's this? And then, it has a setting and some characters start coming up and they start talking to me, and I feel like I'm a documentary filmmaker following them. And occasionally I'll throw in wrenches to see, like, oh, what's the worst thing that could happen here, and how will they react to that? So I'm a mischievous documentary filmmaker.
Sounds like fun.
So I'm interested, like, how do stories come to you? Like, what is that aha moment where you realize this thing is going to be a book? And how do you, can you describe, how do you go from that moment to actually planning your way into a story? And any one of you can jump in and go with it. Feel free.
I already sort of answered this one, saying that I'm very visual as far as where my story origins come from. But as far as deciding whether it's a story or not, that's something that I just know immediately. If it's a story, if it's going to be take a novel form, or whether it's not, whether it's going to be successful or not, to me, depends on the voice. If the voice is there, if I can hear the voice of the story, then I know I've got a novel. If there is no voice, or if it's, I find myself kind of falling back into old patterns from previous books I've read, that's not a new novel. It's not going to be successful for me.
I think it's the ideas that stick around. Like, you'll get an idea, and I'm not going to go sit down and start writing on it, because it might take me a year or 3 to get the idea, into book form. So, and sometimes I'll have an idea and I don't want to write it. It's like a really good idea, but then I think about how much work that would be to write. So I wrote a book about it's called The Running Dream, and it's about a girl who lives to run, and she loses one of her legs in a terrible accident, and the idea of her coming back into life. Well, I didn't know anything about amputation or rehabilitation or prosthetic limbs. I didn't know anything about anything, but I had become so inspired by having run the New York Marathon to raise funds for school libraries, and seeing people with physical challenges that just to me would be insurmountable for running 26.2 miles. And here they did that. And it just kind of, the emotional, the way it hit me emotionally. But I had this idea on the flight home, and I just didn't want to write that story because, oh, it's a tragedy and it's all these things. But it wouldn't go away. It was just there all the time. So I'm okay, I'll do a little research. And so I came into it with a little research, like, who do I talk to about this? And then it's the voice. Then I sat down and I wrote the first chapter, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm a goner now. So yeah, it's like when that character grabs onto you, when you give them a chance to speak, and then they take you away. So ideas come and go, but it's the ones that stick around, the ones that for me anyway, the ones that I will commit my life to.
Dreamland, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually had one lightning bolt moment, and that was after a year and a half of doing research for the latest book, Dreamland Burning, and I had no idea how to frame it. And we actually moved in from a suburb of Tulsa into the fringes of downtown, into an old house that has an old garage apartment. And it was, somebody had rented it out and let a cat stay back there, so it reeked, and we had to have the floor redone. So it was literally walking into this torn up garage apartment, seeing a hole in the floor, and because writers do strange things in their heads, saying, oh, there could be a dead body in there. And so that was the coolest aha, like, there's my frame, there is my story. And I just hope it happens again someday with another story.
Yeah. I also have had, like, it's different. Like, some books are a flash, and other books, it feels like Wendolyn said, they have to stick with me for a long time before I'm willing to commit. My best one was my son came downstairs one morning, and he just was like, Dad, do you smell something? And it was his left armpit. Smelled real funky, but his right armpit didn't. And I was like, oh, it seems like your left armpit went through puberty last night. He was like, what? And we went to Target to buy deodorant, and a guy in a red shirt came up and said, can I help you find something? I'm like, oh, well, my son's left armpit went through puberty last night. And my son, mortified. And he, at the same time, he'd kind of stopped reading, and he was a big fantasy reader for a long time. And at the same moment, sort of, he said stuff like, books don't apply to me. So I thought, I'm going to write a book about a kid whose body kind of goes out of control.
Nice.
And that, really took off, and I could see the lines just sort of shoot out. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen like that all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I relate a lot to what I heard here. I mean, sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's a situation from my past that's unresolved. I mean, I wrote a whole novel. My first YA novel was called Food Girls and Other Things I Can't Have. And it was all based on, I was a heavy kid when I was in high school, and the coach one time asked me if I would try out for football. And I said, no. No way. I was terrified. And I just thought, what if I'd said yes? And so it was one of those classic novels that was just like, what if in the moment I'd said no, I said yes? Would I have lived a different life? Who would I have met? What would my relationship to my body and being physical be? And a whole novel was sort of born from that moment. That was one of the nice times, when it was easy. And then there's other times, like I've heard here, where it's like hacking through a jungle, trying to find the story.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So next question, how do you all feel about plotting? Do you like to plot really tightly, or are you very loose about it? Do you ever use any kind of genre techniques to help you structure a story? For instance, sometimes I have a few books I was thinking about, like, okay, that book is a bank heist movie. I think in terms of movie genres, that book's a bank heist movie, even though it's not about robbing banks at all. But it helped me structure, like there's a certain structure to bank heist movies, and it helped me get into the story in an unusual way. So yeah, how do you feel about plotting? Anyone can jump in.
I'll start with that because as a mystery writer, I think it's important that you are thoughtful about your plotting, because part of the fun of reading a good mystery as the reader is being able to find the clues and follow the clues. And you have the way that I approach it is I want my reader to figure out who done it right before my protagonist does. So you can't do that with a bait and switch. You can't. I want to write a fair mystery. So plotting becomes really important, and I build my plots up on all my books, not just mysteries, but on all my books. I build them up around theme, because I think that as a former teacher, I have things that I want to say to my readers, but you don't want to say that in a message form. You want to say that kind of thematically to give them something to think about. But basically, my process is for a mystery or a young adult or a middle grade book, doesn't matter. My process is I need to know where I'm going. And if I know where I'm going, because if I'm just going to start out, I'm going to get lost. I'm going to get sidetracked because I am such a sidetracky person. I get like interested in little things over there, squirrel. And so when you're writing a book, you need to be able to, especially to keep your reader interested, you need to move things along. So my process is I won't start a book unless I know where I'm going to go, because that'd be like if I was coming to Indiana and I didn't know whether I was going to go, well, I was going to go through Bakersfield from California coast. You're going to go through Bakersfield to get there. But then you can split off. You can go to Las Vegas. You can split off and go to Las Vegas and go north and then go through Utah and Denver. And then you can go north again and then come back down. Or you can take the southern route and go through Oklahoma and get up to Indiana. There are ways you can go. And I want to know how I'm going to get there, because if I don't know how I'm going to get there, then I'm just going to probably wind up in Seattle. So I'm going to get lost. So I do this thing called signposting. And for me, signposting is like, okay, I'm making it to Barstow tonight. That's where I'm going to go. So with my chapter, I'm going to get to Barstow. So I know where I'm going, but then stuff can happen along the way. Like I can get a flat tire, or I can get locked in an outhouse, or I don't know what. Something can happen to me. But and so maybe it'll take me 2 chapters to get to Barstow. And then I'm going to decide, am I going to go north, or I'm going to go, due east, or where am I going to go? So I've got other signposts along the way. I'm going to get to Albuquerque. That's where I'm going next. And so but the end result is I'm going to wind up, in Indiana. So that's where I'm going. And I need to know that before I start. And so that's how I plot.
I don't think about plotting, actually. I think about story structure and the experience of the character. So I may actually be doing something actually similar to what Wendellin's doing, but with different language. I'm thinking about the character's journey and what they're experiencing along the way, the obstacles, what they're trying to achieve, and that the plot kind of emerges from that emotional journey of the character. So if I'm, so for example, if I'm just thinking, so I'm never thinking, I'd love to put an explosion in, that would be cool. Like I might think, it would be cool to have an explosion, but what does it mean? How does it affect the hero? Just an explosion doesn't actually have any meaning on its own. But, if I'm 3 houses away from getting to the place where the girl I love lives, for the first time to declare my love, and there's an explosion and the street gets closed down. Now I've got a problem. So something cool has happened, but in any case, I'm always thinking about that, my hero or the main character, and what is going on inside that character. That's me.
Oh,
Yeah, I would agree with Alan. It's, for me, plot is something that the character informs and not the other way around. I would say the one exception is the book that I'm writing right now. And it is based on like a super familiar, and I can't tell you the title because it would be very spoilery, but a super familiar movie from my childhood because it's got the similar like training sequence, adventure, whatever. And so this is the first time that I ever said, all right, I'm writing this action adventure thing. I'm going to have these beats and it's going to go here. But even so, about, I don't know, 50% through the first draft, I chucked that and just, like it got me to my skeleton, and then I just made my own way beyond there. So who knows whether the final draft will have any similarity at all to the original skeleton that I used to start with. We'll see.
I really feel like I have to jump in here because I feel like I write the movie Star Wars over and over. And when Melody said that, I thought, we could very well be talking about the same thing. Yeah, and it's like Gwendolyn said, I have the Death Star, like the Death Star in every book, and it's usually like sort of an emotional Death Star. It's not the events of the Death Star, but I know where it wants to go. And so that Death Star is sitting out there, and I do a lot of like the training sequence and things too when I'm in the middle of the book, and I'm like, nah, I'm not sure. I know that the character needs to learn something here in order to be in this new world. Oh, what happened on the Millennium Falcon? And then you could like translate that into a good scene. But yeah, I because I do all the character work in advance, I always feel like I know the characters really well, and what they need in those moments are what drives the Luke on the Millennium Falcon doing his thing. So was it the right movie, Melanie?
No, but I love that. I want a Death Star in my next book.
Hey, Jeff,
is Darth Vader always a parent?
Very often, yes.
Jeff, when you said you interviewed the characters earlier, what did you mean by that, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, I started with a set of 36 questions that I'd actually gotten in a class, long time ago. And I've expanded it to, about 70 questions that I ask. And then I ask a lot of questions about their relationships, and they answer in their voice. And so I'm just loaded with material before the book starts. And if I don't do that, it's a waste of my time. It feels like the story happens by doing those interviews.
So you're like doing a writing improvisation where you're interviewing the characters on a page and writing their answers and learning about them.
Yeah. It's really great. Fun too, as long as you don't get impatient with yourself. I mean, it's so easy to get impatient and say I should be, doing page count or word count or something. But it saves time in the end. Yeah.
Jennifer, do you want to add anything?
This all sounds very familiar. Just having that basic arc and then giving yourself some room to be creative in the middle. I think in practical terms, people ask what your process is day to day. I'd say that what that breaks down to on a daily basis is that I have quit worrying about word counts. I know a lot of people find them really useful, use little programs to get to a certain point, but I've started thinking about the story in terms of what's happening now, what event in the character's life do I need to get through? So it's always satisfying when you do that. And then you can start thinking about how that feeds into the next.
Cool. So in relationship to characters, what is your relationship to characters? Are you like the god dictating everyone's fate in your story, or do you feel the characters are leading you? And sometimes do they get away from you? You can just jump in.
I will say I have written some characters that felt really good to kill. So in that sense, they got away, but they needed to. But in general, they're fairly well behaved because they do come from somewhere in my brain. I don't know about the rest of you.
So characters are a really strange thing to me, but and going a little against what other people have said, is I feel like no matter how much I have introduced myself to the character, I've had them introduce themselves to me, I don't know them until we've gone on this journey together. And that's where the revision process comes in, because by the end of the story, that's when I really know my character. And then I can go back and support the person that now I know. That it's like a friend. You're getting to know a friend. And so I what's strange to me about characters is as I get to know them, they start teaching me things. They start informing my life. They start changing the way I view things. And that seems a real like Mobius strippy, because you're the one creating them. But somehow they kind of take over, and they pull out of me things that I didn't know existed. And they take me places that I didn't want to go, but I'm really glad I did. So it's like I start out thinking I'm in control. And although I'm ultimately the one that controls their movements, they will take me and say, no, you're going over here. And then I'll say, okay, I'm going over there. And we'll see where that takes me. So the characters are funny. And I think all of us talk about our characters probably like they're alive, which to people who aren't writers is a really weird thing. But it's like they invade your mind for years. And like 18 books in a series, Sammy Keys has been in my life, for all those years. And so, yes, she is a big part. She feels very real to me. And I talk about her like she's real. And they just become part of your heart.
In my new novel, Wild and Chance, or there's actually two of them, two books 1 and 2. The main character is a dog, and the whole story is told from the perspective of a dog, and a female dog who's hyper intelligent and can understand English and can speak through a collar translator. And people have asked me like how first of all, do you have dogs? And it's like, no, I don't even own a dog. And but it's really interesting because I get her, I get the ways that she's hurt. I get the way that she's, all my characters on some level are dealing with the same kind of thing that I'm dealing with, emotionally, spiritually, something that I'm struggling with. In this case, she's trying to find home, and what feels like home to her, what feels safe. And I can totally relate to that. So even though I'm writing a character that, well, how could anyone be further from me than a female dog? Emotionally, I completely seem to understand her. And then, like has been shared here, I learn as I go. And to some extent, she tells me where she wants to go. I never get distracted wanting to play with a toy or, run after a ball, but I get that she can be torn between, running for a ball and saving a kid's life,
Yeah.
I love being taken on a journey through my characters. My first YA, Audacity, is about an actual historical figure who lived in the early 1900s, or was active in the labor movement in the early 1900s. And she was a firebrand, and she was bold, and she was so brave. And being able to step into her shoes was amazing. And stepping back out of them, of course, but I'm not her. I'm not that brave, and I'm not that firebrand. But it was really an honor to be able to be inside of her for a while. And then my new book, Maisie, similarly, she's an actress. She is nothing like me. And it was just a joy to be able to put myself into her story and to put myself into her shoes. And it was just delightful. I loved writing that book. The only time when I really assert myself as the author and say, no, we have to do this. I don't like to have my characters do bad things. I like for bad things to happen to them and then they rise above, and that is what I like. I do not like when my characters make bad choices and put themselves in bad situations, and occasionally I have to just make them make terrible decisions and do terrible things, and I don't enjoy that, but I have to, I just.
Well, that is a perfect lead into the next question, which is, I've noticed a lot in beginning writers, they often have trouble being mean to their characters, meaning putting them in peril or making them suffer emotionally or physically, usually because they're probably some form of themselves and they want to be nice to them. But that's the stuff of drama. So how do you feel about putting your characters in danger? Do you feel sorry for them? Do you get a perverse kick out of it? And the second part of that question is, how emotionally involved do you get in a character's life? Do you ever cry at some point of emotional release as you're writing that character's big moment?
I'll just jump in. I really do like, and maybe it's masochistic, I don't know. I beat the crap out of the characters. And I do enjoy it. And I am very much invested in what's happening to them. And before the pandemic, I wrote mostly in coffee shops because there's something about having action going on around me that feels good. And I speak with them and I cry. And so I've had people come up to me like, "Are you okay?" Like, no.
Yeah, I relate to that last part. I definitely, I think that probably most authors, but certainly me, we're going through the experience that the reader will go through, maybe in a even purer form, a more intense form, maybe because I have to go through it, 25 times while I'm doing drafts, but I'll often find myself weeping because of a scene or so tense. I've been writing an action sequence and I'll stand up from a desk and I need to go to the chiropractor, and it's been going, I think I'm fine. It's like Matrix, I'm just sitting in the chair, but my body is fighting, so I totally relate to that. And then on the other thing, there's a great writing teacher, Al Watt, who actually taught me this. It's been so helpful for years. And he says something like that, when you have a relationship to the ending of the story, when you have some sense of what the ending is, that your character is going to be okay, then it gives you permission to put them through hell. And so when that's been so important for me, because I know how it's going to turn out, the reader doesn't, but I do. And so I can put a character through all kinds of stuff, not with the same glee that Jeff does, but I can put them through all kinds of terrible things, but only because I know they're going to be okay in the end. If I didn't know that, it would be really hard, and I would tend to shy away, as you talked about, Greg.
And I think that when you have when they go through so much to get what it is they're hoping to achieve, like having them go through that pain and those setbacks and things, that makes achieving that goal so much sweeter for your hero and also for the reader. It's like, yes, you're just cheering for that person to get what it was they were after. I have to tell you that after 18 books in the series, I bawled my eyes out with the last line of the last book. It was, I'm going to cry just thinking about it right now. And so, yes, you get super invested. And a box of Kleenex is definitely one of the tools of my trade.
Yeah. When I was writing my second YA, An Uninterrupted View of the Sky, it's set mostly in Oblivion Prison. And living there in my head for months and months and months, wore on me. And I like to listen to folk music, acoustic, that's my thing. When I was writing that book, when I would be done with my writing time, I had to turn on
pop music. It was like, okay, we got to get this mood back up because it was so intense, the situations in the story. So absolutely. That's the thing about being a writer who is, writes by this sense of intuition is that you're feeling everything. So it's intense, really intense.
I know Jennifer likes to revenge kill some of her characters. Have that emotional attachment as well.
Absolutely. And when I think back to the books that made the biggest impact on me when I was a younger reader, the one that really inspired me to write books about difficult topics was Jacob Have I Loved, which by Catherine Patterson. And it just hit me when I was probably 12 reading it. I do not have a sister, I'll preface it with this, but to have this main character who hates her sister. And the book is about her dealing with that and the reader understanding why she does and how she has to grow as a person to get beyond this. It has stuck with me. And so I guess I want to give that same thing to readers. So when characters suffer, I'm perfectly aware that most of the kids who are reading these books are going through some kind of suffering of their own. How extreme it is, I don't know. I hope not that extreme, but kids are dealing with really hard stuff out there. And when you give them characters who suffer realistically like they do, and also triumph realistically, I think that makes for the kind of book that will stick with a younger reader through their life.
Yeah. So there is this old Hollywood adage that if you can't see the poster for a movie or describe your story in one sentence or a tagline, you don't really know what your story is about yet. Do you ever do any kind of exercise, whether it's like designing a mock-up cover or writing the flap jacket copy, even before you write the story, to help you figure out what the core of your story is or what it's really about? Do you have any kind of exercise you go through early on?
I don't. I fight so hard against that idea that we have to have a tagline. I'm just like resisting. I'm like, no, I could never do it. It's terrible. That's the truth.
I have a great fun exercise that I do with young writers sometimes, and it works for me, the old writer too. And it's that I ask people to or I'll just say how I do it. I find a piece of music that feels like my story, like a new story. And I just play the piece of music and I imagine the film trailer of the book. So I imagine the scenes that would be in this story and I just kind of let it bubble, so the music's playing and I'm like, oh, I want the moment where she fights, I want the moment where they break up. I want the moment where, and I find that just it gives my imagination a fun place to play. It takes me away from I got to figure it out, like the one line thing, like people were saying that can really choke me. But when I'm just playing music then and imagining a film clips almost, I find it very freeing.
I always feel like a kid in the story, the one with their arms crossed and they're dragging their feet and they don't want to be there, because people like your critique partner or your agent or your editor, they're the ones who say, well, condense it down to a sentence. And then when you have to, you're like, oh crap, I have to do this or my agent won't send the book out. So there are people who force you to do it and it's a useful exercise, but I hate it.
I don't do it beforehand at all because I feel like I don't really, even though I think I know what the story is, I've done this enough to know that I don't really know what the story is until I've done the story. So when the story's done, but then I find it to be really helpful because to be able to summarize in a couple of sentences, because I tend to just want to say everything about a story. I've worked on it so hard and it means so much to me. And there are all these things that I want people to understand about it when they ask me, what are you working on? So I'm not good at doing that. And I resist doing that. But the funny thing is that I have recently during the pandemic helped two of my friends go through manuscripts. They've always wanted to be writers. They read Hope in the Mail and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I got to the end of both of, and I gave them the same advice. What is it you're trying to say with this book? Can you say in just a sentence or two what you're trying to say with this book? Because if you can't say that at the end of your book, tell me what it's about in a sentence or two, then you haven't fully developed your theme or your thoughts or your threads, or, you know, you need to be able to say that. So here I am giving them this advice that I hate to take myself, but I do think is very valuable for you to be able to define what it is you're trying to say or what your story's about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That I've made my students in a novel workshop do this, and I've only done it the last 2 books, and it really works. But I also can't believe I give students instructions that I won't follow myself. But so I actually, after there's a pretty good draft, I'll do a fake review of my own book, which is, you know, you have to do a couple sentences of summary and a couple of sentences about why it's important, and then the superlatives, so I know what I'm aiming for. And it really, that sort of like model, which my students hate, they hate it so much, is really helpful when, you know, getting yourself ready for doing the final draft.
But you never write a bad review.
Oh my God, no. That was those will come.
All right, we have a couple of questions from the audience here. One is talking about a writing teacher giving them an exercise using Venn diagrams to help kind of visualize their story. Does anybody use anything like that? Visually, kind of graphics?
I don't use Venn diagrams, but I do have a wall in my office downstairs where I will have lists, and I'll have maps of like the area that a character's hiking through, and I'll have a bunch of visual aids, but I don't use Venn diagrams for my stories.
I use mind maps.
Maps?
They don't look any particular way. They're just however the ideas come out on a page. And sometimes there are lines connecting clouds. Sometimes it's just a list, but just giving yourself the freedom to throw things down onto a page without organizing them, I think can be a good creativity job.
Yeah, I've tried that one too, and it can be helpful. Yeah, if it works for you, do it. But yeah, they kind of look like Venn diagrams, so the circles and the lines, but nothing crossing like a Venn diagram.
And then another question is, how do you decide which verb tense to use and which point of view to use for a particular story?
The characters decide that one for me.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Even like tenses?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just went through the painstaking process of changing a novel from first to third. No, I don't know that I'm going to give advice about this because I did it all the wrong way. But this book, when this book came to me, I knew very clearly that it was going to be present tense, 2/3 of the book in past, and then the last third in present again. So that I knew. I just got the point of view wrong. We'll see. What my editor might change it, make me change it back. So we'll see.
I write almost everything in first person present tense. It may be because I'm not a very good writer. It may be because it's my stories in a sense are monologues that are unfolding. I do like that style because it's incredibly immediate and very alive. And I've written some other stuff in third person as well, but mostly I'm doing what comes naturally and allowing it to flow. So I'm rarely stuck in like a riddle of what I should do. It's usually just tells me what to do. Yeah.
I usually write in first person, and that could be present tense or past tense, but I like the immediacy of first person. It does restrict you, especially if you're writing for tweens or teens or younger, because you want your language to feel authentic to the reader. So third person enables you to have your prose can be more creative or more, I don't know, more eloquent. But I really like to get to the heart of the character and what they're going through. And so my choice always, well, not always, but usually winds up being first person, either present or past.
Yeah, I've always written in first or present and past, and I don't know why, present or past. Even when it's in past, it feels like such a recent past that it could almost be in present. There's no reflective distance at all. It's just right on top of the events. I wrote the book that I'm just finishing now is in third person though, and I've never been able to do it. And for some reason, it popped out that way, and I like it. So that's great.
First can be very frustrating too, because the character only knows what they see or what they're told. So you can't, cut away to secret machinations going on in a different room. Or I'm interested how Wendelin writes mysteries, because you can't know what someone else is doing. You only know what the character's point of view knows. And so it can be very restricting, but it can also be really exciting. Do you run into that problem, Wendelin? Yeah.
No, she needs to be a lot of places. So it's, and I like for my reader to feel like they are Sammy Keyes, or they are Sammy Keyes' best friend, and they're going along on this. So I didn't find it restrictive in that way, because she's telling the story and she keeps me plenty busy.
Right. Well, I think we're getting right to the end. I just want to throw out one quick question. Does anybody have any books that they use as kind of the bar of perfection in terms of, maybe it's flawlessly plotted, or, has some kind of brilliant level of character study? Does anyone have any model that they use, like someday I'll achieve that?
The Westing game is pretty impressive.
I think that the books that I like the best are the ones that I don't even aspire to be able to write like that, because then I just feel like that's a completely different thing than what I do, but I can really admire the way that it's crafted. And I think the book that I read most recently that had that effect on me was Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. I just loved that book.
Yeah, I don't have a particular title to offer, but I'll just say that's because there's no one standard for me. I have this moment when I'm writing or when I'm conceiving of an idea, and the level of inspiration will all of a sudden it's like it busts through the ceiling, and it like opens up, and the possibilities suddenly become like endless. And it's because of inspiration I've gotten from other writers or other stories. And it's not a single book, but it's this general wisdom contained, with all of us creatives working out there that feeds that. And when that happens, it's the most amazing sensation.
Well, sadly, our hour is up. I could sit for hours and listen to authors talk about their process. I like how everybody's both different and the same, and everything in between. So I want to thank everybody for participating in this panel. It's been great. And I'm going to turn it back over to Diane to wrap things up.
Before you do, tell us the name of your movie again. That's very exciting news.
The name of my movie is called Concrete Cowboy. It is on Netflix.
And we should all go watch it tonight.
You can all go watch it tonight, yes.
And what's it feel like, Greg, to see your work adapted like that?
It's
in 10 words or less.
Pretty good situation all around. It was very much like an independent film where everybody gave back to the production, very much community oriented. So really focused on the real world that it's based on. And it's been pretty wonderful throughout. despite being delayed for so long because of the pandemic, now it's finally like happening. So it's all good.
All right, we want to know your
Congratulations.
tagline. What's your tagline?
My tagline
Yes,
for that
you're on the
movie,
spot.
man, I can't even think now. My
Uh-huh.
tagline is go watch it.
That explains
That's a
the
good
movie.
tagline.
All right.
Okay, so goodness, that was an absolutely fantastic panel. Thank you all to all the authors, and our moderator for participating tonight. So Melanie, Jennifer, Jeff, Gwendolyn, Alan, and Greg, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And finally, audience, thank you for participating. I do want to remind you that our panel tonight is one in a series for the RosieCon Book Festival. And our next panel is happening on April 21st. This is also our last panel. And the topic is It's a Messy Life. So life is complicated and messy, and these authors discuss how they portray life through the realistic characters and plots. We have Lori Halse Anderson, Carl Duker, Cami Garcia, Kekla Magoon, and Francisco Stork will be joining us on that panel. And it will be moderated by my former student, so proud of him, Jay Coles. And so he will be joining us for our last panel, and he will be the moderator. As all of our panels, you can sign up for free. You can either subscribe to the RosieCon YouTube channel or sign up from the RosieCon website to get the Zoom link. All right, so thank you, everyone. I hope that you had fun tonight. Please be safe, stay healthy, and again, thank you for joining us. Have a good night.